Author and outspoken commentator Douglas Murray is on the front line of the war in Israel. He detailed his harrowing experiences to Sky News All-Stars Piers Morgan and Rita Panahi. These are his thoughts. Douglas Murray discussed the unfair attribution of innocent Palestinian deaths throughout the war to Israel, when in fact Hamas has been killing their own people.
The first thing is, should those deaths really be attributed to the Israeli side? We saw the other day the BBC and other media reported that the people who were lying dead on the street on one of the main routes through Gaza was alleged to be a massacre carried out by Israelis. It turned out it wasn't the case at all. It was Hamas massacring Palestinians fleeing south, as the Israelis had recommended they do. So the question, in a way, that you ask, I would say there's an answer to, which is who exactly is responsible for these deaths? If you do, as Hamas does, decide to build bunkers and put rockets on them and then put hospitals on top of them, who exactly is responsible for that? Is it the Israelis and their response, or is it Hamas for doing that? If you do decide, as Hamas has done, to use all of these billions of dollars of international aid to build tunnels where you can hide, among other things, the kidnapped Israelis, who's responsible for the strikes that happen as a result and any civilian deaths? Is it the Israelis, or is it Hamas, who has been holding the Palestinian peoples of the Gaza hostage for the last 15 years and more? Again, I repeat this point. You know, a lot of what has been said about this seems to suggest that Hamas has no responsibility for this. You know,
he added Israel is held to an unfair standard and expectation, which he sees as unequal.
I think there's a very particular standard that the Israelis are held to. I think it's an unfair standard, it's an unequal standard, it's an intolerable standard for the Israelis. But when people say, you know, you've just got to sort of live with this, the Israelis quite rightly will be saying, well, we don't see quite why we do.
And Douglas Murray was reminded of the scary realities of reporting from a war zone when his interview with Piers Morgan was momentarily disrupted by a rocket attack.
The comparison between Hamas and the Nazis is insufficient. And sorry, there's an incoming.
Get safe, Douglas.
Come.
Are you okay, Douglas?
It came from the other direction, so. Okay. Anyhow, we're okay.
Are you okay?
Let's just. Yeah. It's fine. Sorry, it was a rocket coming. Looked like it was just going to land on us here.
Which way was that rocket coming from?
Okay.
Was it coming from Gaza or from Israel?
Yes, it seemed to be coming from Gaza. So. Yeah, it's fine. It's okay. It's been happening all day. Let me just finish this point, if I may.
Before we go on, Douglas, Atman, how does that make
Sure.
you? How does that make you feel? What just happened there?
I mean, it's. I'm a little used to it. I was in Ukraine last year and was in Kherson and Odessa and Mykolaiv, and when the Russians were shelling it, so I'm a little used to it.
Douglas Murray then went on to tell Piers Morgan that the ordinary Palestinian population in Gaza are not peaceful people, and that they're no better than Hamas.
Your question supposes that there is a sort of peaceful Palestinian population in the Gaza who would love a two-state solution, and then a few bad apples in Hamas. I think that's not true. Why is it that when one of the victims of the music festival, a poor young German Jewish girl, who it seems was raped and then brutally murdered and taken into the Gaza naked. Why was it that you can find, and anyone can find this online, a crowd of ordinary Gazans? It wasn't Hamas, it wasn't a Hamas rally. Ordinary Gazans spitting on her body, hitting her body, mutilating her body further as it went down the street. Does that strike you, Piers, as a placid population of peacenik types who are just desperately waiting for a two-state solution to be put back on the table for the millionth time in the last 70-something years? It doesn't seem like that to me.
No, but there are over 2 million people in Gaza, and there weren't 2 million people in that video clip. There were a few hundred. So I don't like to make...
Yeah, well, a few hundred at random. And did you see anyone in it saying, hey, guys, stop. We're not meant to mutilate the bodies of girls or rape them in public? No, I didn't see that.
Douglas Murray also made the frightening discovery that Hamas are worse than Nazis, as they display no remorse. In fact, they celebrate their brutality.
Even the Nazis were actually ashamed of what they did. You know, SS battalions who spent their days shooting Jews in the back of the head and pushing them into trenches had to get very, very drunk in the evening to forget what they had done. The Nazi high command famously had to sort of get around the problem of soldier morale because the soldiers knew this wasn't exactly what their lives were meant to look like either. I tell you one very big difference. If you look at the footage, the raw footage, and I really hope people don't on a wider scale have to view what I viewed the other day, if they see it, they will see something that is at least as barbaric as what the Nazis did. But here's the difference. They did it with glee. They were deeply proud. You see people trying to, taking the head off a young Israeli man with a shovel and then calling their parents back in Gaza and telling them, Father, I've killed 10 Jews with my own hands. Get mother on the phone. I want to tell her how great a job her son has done. I come back to this thing. I'm not exaggerating this. It's very, very interesting, and people need to realize you had this situation with the Nazis, where they also were a genocidal anti-Semitic organization, but they tried to cover their crimes up. Hamas are actually proud of them, and they've said they will do them until the whole world is clear of Jews.
Yeah.
So I suggest we take that seriously, and I think that Israel is taking it seriously. I hope they continue to take it seriously, but I think the world should take it seriously, and that includes Britain.
And Piers Morgan asked Douglas Murray to predict how the war would end.
It's too early to tell. I would just say this, and I've said this before, but Israel is one of the only countries in the world that's never allowed to win a conflict. It has been left with this question of the Palestinians in the West Bank, the question of the Palestinians in Gaza. It's been left with this for years. And by the way, I say left with it because, remember, the Jordanians could solve the problem in the West Bank immediately by taking the Palestinians therein or taking some kind of control. They don't want to. The Egyptians, I have friends who were born in Gaza when it was owned by the Egyptians, run by the Egyptians. The Egyptians could solve the Gaza problem tomorrow by allowing the Gazans into Egypt or taking control of the Gaza themselves. Nobody wants the Palestinians people. And there's this endless mistake that is being made, and it has been made all my lifetime certainly, which is that there's this unsolved problem, but it is the job of the Israelis to solve it. What is happening behind me is a demonstration of the fact that it is an insoluble problem that the Israelis keep being told to solve. Gaza, ever since the Israelis left it in 2005, could have become Singapore. It could have become a thriving place. But Hamas didn't want that. They wanted to turn it into a place, instead of building upwards, they built downwards. Instead of building great buildings, they built great tunnels. This is a tragedy for the Palestinian peoples, but it's one that has been brought on them by groups like Hamas, who do not want a settlement in this war.
Douglas Murray, so powerful to talk to you there on the Gaza border, and I'm glad that you came through what was a pretty scary moment in the middle of that interview.
Douglas Murray and Piers Morgan also discussed the double standards which are allowed when it comes to protesting and hate speech.
Look, I'm afraid that the rules on this are very, very clear. You are not allowed to glorify terror or call for terror on the streets of Britain. And that existed before the 2006 Terrorism Act banned glorification, and it certainly exists now. If you stand on the streets of London calling for jihad, you are calling for terror, and that is actually a place where free speech is at its limit and is no longer permissible. It's the same with, for instance, calls for intifada on the London tubes. Remember, we had a touch of intifada on the London tubes a few years ago. So again, calling for intifada is something that you're not allowed to do in the UK.
Okay,
you're not
but Douglas,
allowed to
let me
call
ask
for
you
murder.
this.
You're not allowed to. Let me finish one other case. You're not allowed to stand on the streets of London and call for the murder of Jews or any other minority.
No.
And yet people have been getting away with this
No,
Saturday after
these
Saturday.
are right.
And are the police arresting people? No.
Right.
No, they're not. The police last week said we're outnumbered.
Right. So that is a key point.
He also went on to discuss the sorry state of policing, which has come to light following mass pro-Palestine protests, with Sky News All-Star Rita Panahi.
Yes, first of all, when the BLM protests went on in London, which got very unpleasant, we had officers of the Metropolitan Police taking the knee when the crowd insisted that they do so, and they actually did. In that, you know, that gesture that people did at the time.
Oh, yes.
As a sort of kowtowing gesture. They actually did that. We've seen Extinction Rebellion and other eco-loon protests where the police have actually, I mean, there was one protest, they shut down a bridge in London, and there was video of a policeman actually sort of like getting on a skateboard and playing with the activists instead of wrenching them off the roads and getting them arrested. There's no doubt that there's a double standard in policing, and we've seen it in spades in recent weeks with the anti-Israel demonstrations in London and across the UK. You know, people have been threatened with arrest if they go near these protests carrying an English or a British flag, because that would be, Rita, inflammatory. But at the same time, the police have stood idly by as people have called for jihad, for genocide, and much more. It's an obscene double standard, but we can see why. One police officer even said as much last week on camera, said, "We're outnumbered here." So they are clearly intimidated by this mob.